Our story begins with a young, ambitious Roman general named Julius. Julius gained fame through military victory and had expanded Rome's borders all across Europe, making it the largest empire this side of the world had ever seen. Not everyone was happy with Julius's rise to fame, though, and a civil war broke out between the Senate, who claimed the right to rule Rome, and Julius's military. Julius emerged victorious from the conflict and titled himself Julius Gaius Caesar, unquestioned ruler of Rome. Later in his rule, though, remaining dissidents to his authority found a way to assassinate him, and a power vacuum was created. Rome went into civil war again, this time between Julius's lead general, Mark Antony, and his protege, Octavius. Octavius proved the winner and became Augustus Caesar, the second Caesar of Rome. Octavius was now the ruler not just of Romans, but also many other tribes and peoples who had been conquered by Rome. Some of these races were the Gauls, the Teutons, the Parthians, and the Jews. None of them liked being under the Romans, so they all from time to time would have small rebellions in desperate attempts to gain freedom. The Jews were a people who inhabited a small strip of land beside the Mediterranean Sea called Judea. Not only did they not like the Romans, but they had a prophecy they would be freed from Rome as well. See, the Jews told the story of a particular prophet of theirs who was around 300 years ago. Back then, the Jews were ruled by the Persians, and the Persian king had a Jewish advisor named Daniel. Daniel was that prophet. One night, Daniel had a vision of 4 beasts. They were a lion, a lopsided bear, a leopard with 4 heads, and a terrible beast. These were meant to represent the nations that would conquer the Jews. The lion was Babylon, the first nation that dragged the Jews into exile. The lopsided bear was Persia, that Daniel was currently serving. The leopard was the Greek Empire, whose expansion was led by Alexander the Great. And the 4th beast was identified as Rome. The 4th beast was said to be the last one, and God himself would come down and destroy it. Because of that, many Jewish religious leaders would encourage their young men to lead rebellion against Rome. Many of these young men thought they would be the Messiah, a Jewish title for the prophesied Savior, and in some miraculous fashion overthrow the Roman rule. Unfortunately for them, the Romans were the most elite fighting force in that time of history, and no Jewish rebellion ever gained the upper hand against the legions. As punishment for rebellion, the Romans would crucify these rebels just outside the towns of Judea to make sure the locals knew just who was in charge. There was another person who made the claim for the title Messiah. This was the king of Judea, King Herod. King Herod was originally just an official in Judea. However, in the recent Roman civil war, he had switched his allegiance from Mark Antony to Octavius at the last minute. When Octavius became Augustus Caesar, he made Herod king over all Judea for his allegiance. This did not go down well with the Jewish religious leaders and politicians. To appease them, Herod did things such as rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem in a magnificent fashion. Although he also built a temple to the Roman gods out of Jewish sight just to the north of Judea. He undertook many great engineering projects during his reign, such as built a man-made bay in the Mediterranean that required hundreds of thousands of tons of a special cement made of volcanic ash that could set underwater, to be shipped from Greece to Judea to build a port where previously none was possible. Despite his endeavors of progress, King Herod was unfortunately also extremely cruel and paranoid. He was notorious for the vicious treatments of his political enemies and gained particular infamy when he murdered his own sons out of fear they would ascend to the throne. Now, this is where the story starts getting weird. One day, Augustus decides to count just how many people he was ruling over and called for a nationwide census over all of Rome. As the census was underway, three strange men presented themselves before King Herod, asking for permission to enter Judea. They claimed they were magicians, and that they had seen a star in the sky they believed indicated the birth of a new king. Why did King Herod take such strangers seriously? We are not sure, but perhaps his paranoia about other kings overrode his sensibilities. He granted the wanderers permission to find the child, not letting them know that he secretly wanted to kill this potential new threat. It is interesting to note that the Jewish religious leaders did not receive any memo from God that the Messiah that they were looking for had come. Perhaps they were too busy trying to get young Jewish men to rebel and make their own Messiah to notice. On the way to finding the child, the three magicians encountered some Jewish shepherds heading the same way. The shepherds told them a strange story about the appearance of men dressed in shining white clothes, announcing the birth of a savior. Together, the magicians and the shepherds made haste to follow the star and found themselves not at the house of some rich and powerful family, but at an animal shed instead. Inside, they find a poor laborer named Joseph and his young 16-year-old wife, Mary, with their newborn child. Joseph tells them that they had just arrived in town, having traveled because of the census, and there was no other accommodation available besides the barn. Amazed, the magicians and shepherds pay their respects to the baby. They are told his name is Jesus. The magicians do not return to King Herod, and Herod is furious. He takes their predictions so seriously that he spends a lengthy amount of time looking for the child, quite possibly up to 2 years. And when he discovers that the star had rested over the town of Bethlehem, he orders an infanticide. Every child below the age of 2 is brutally murdered by Herod's men, and there is great terror and mourning in the little town of Bethlehem. It is estimated that about 20 to 30 children were killed. Fortunately for the baby Jesus, Joseph had taken him and his mother and run away to Egypt. There he hid until King Herod died. How would this little child, the son of a poor laborer, in a time of war and madness, become more influential than the Caesars of Rome and far greater than King Herod? How would he be called a king when the only crown he ever wore was woven out of barbed wire? Why would the Romans crucify him when he never lifted a sword or a word against them? That is another story that perhaps I will tell you come Easter time. I hope you enjoyed the telling of the Nativity. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And if you enjoy comics and discussions about biblical stories, do check out my blog cwvong.com. Have yourselves a good one this festive season. Ta-ta!